This program is presented by University of California Television. Like what you learn? Visit our website or follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up with the latest UCTV programs.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for staying for our conversation / Q&A. Like I mentioned before the movie, this is the director, Luciana Kaplan. I was going to do an extended introduction afterwards, but I think things will come out afterwards. Yeah, she doesn't want me to do that. So we'll actually just jump right in. And I think I want to start with the first general question of how the project came about. And how did you find Eufrosina? How did you first approach her? How did that come about?
Well, it was... I wasn't looking for this story or this woman. It just happened because it's a friend of mine who's a journalist. She told me about her. Who was just lost her seat at her town. It happened. This part of the story that is told in the beginning. And when I met her, I thought she was really interesting because she was fighting against something that it was very complicated. And it was a fight inside the community to change something. It had been changed for years and it was very hard. So I thought it was potentially very interesting. She was very appealing, very strong, very intelligent, and I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew that something could happen. I never imagined that was the thing that was going to happen, of course. But it was just like a hunch, I think. I said, well, let's do something. So I started following her. Mm-hmm. I went to her town. At first we were just two people with a camera and a mics, and then it just started being bigger and bigger, and then it was a big film.
And I think you mentioned that you did it sort of in stages, right? So you went and got some footage and talked to her for a bit, and then you came back and applied for the grant. Yes. And then it worked. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it took 2 years to film this documentary. So at first, as I told you, 2 weeks after I met her, because she told me, you can do a film about me, but you have to come to my community so you understand how's all the environment and the context, of course. Yeah. So I went. We were just, as I tell you, 2 persons with one camera and a couple of mics with my money, and we started shooting. Then we came back and I applied for a grant, and they gave it to me, but 5 months after that. But I kept shooting all the time, and then I got a little money, and then I applied to this other support of my film school. Mm-hmm. For the Opera Prima project, so I got all the funding. So there was a bigger crew with a real photographer right. And a real sound person, and it became quite bigger. But it took me, 1 year and a half until I got this big funding. So most of the shooting I did it just with a smaller crew.
Yeah, and is that common for documentary projects in Mexico?
Yeah, I think so. I think that everywhere, you start doing something and then you get funding because you need a teaser or something. So right. It's complicated because if you don't have that, you cannot apply. But if you don't have funding, it's hard to make a teaser. Right. So it's so kind of yes. So yeah. Well, now there's development funds, so you can ask for that. But still, you need some research and a teaser. So you need some. Yeah. Funding that you have to do yourself most of the time, so right. It's kind of tricky.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Before we go into the specifics of the film, since you just mentioned it, can you give us a sort of a general idea of what the documentary filmmaking community is in Mexico? Within the school, or where do filmmakers come from? How do they develop the projects? We talked about film financing, but also in general,
Well, it's very big, and I don't think that you can say that it's just like a specific group, because there's all kind of people like making documentaries. There's like the filmmakers that went to film school, and there's some kind of a group, of a gang that I'm part of it, I have to say. But
you're the
and
leader
then,
of the gang.
yeah, well, no, but you know, there's there are people that went to film school, and that we're trying to do like another kind of like a documentary. It's more like visual, more close to fiction, I have to say. You know, and we're like very much into like storytelling, and then, but there was a lot of production of people that they haven't been to film school, and they're trying to do like small things all around. So there's a lot of people,
right.
Since there's like video cameras and it's like cheaper. So everybody is trying to make a film. Yeah. So it's hard to say that there's only one group. I think it's all kind of people doing stuff. But I think in the last like 10 years it became like much more important, because now there's like a lot of festivals. There's this big festival called Ambulante that I think they changed the game a little bit, because they start like showing these documentaries in theaters, and they're really great films. So, and then there's DocsDF, and you know, it's big. It's starting to be like bigger and bigger, and it's starting to show in film theaters, which I think is
documentaries in film theaters.
Yes,
yeah. Which is
so
rare.
that's really important, because now they're kind of like in the same level. I mean, it will never be, but it's like starting to be like closer to fiction in that sense.
And national product too, because for a long time, Mexican film theaters would mostly just show Hollywood stuff, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Yeah.
So now they're starting to show other kind of films. So.
Yeah, that's good. And also, you mentioned this in class before, but just for people who weren't there, about the gender composition of documentary filmmakers, which was very interesting.
Yeah, I think there's like most of the people that are making films are women now, and they keep asking me why. I really don't know, because all the answers that I say, they just don't sound right. So I don't know, but it's very interesting that there are like so many women making documentary films. And as I told in class, I think they expect like women to make kind of a more like sentimental films, or more like kind of pink kind of films, but quite the opposite. They're doing like most like strong films. And they're talking about issues that nobody wants to talk about like violence and war and things that are really strong. So I think there's a stigma that is going away, that women only can make like very sensitive films, but they can do all kinds of films, which I think is great.
Yeah, no, it's great. Also, it's interesting because, especially compared to what the news media is like in Mexico, which is very conglomerate, very consolidated, having so many other stories being told in those kind of ways. I think it's very important.
It's really important to tell things in another point of view, and not only violence, because there's the thing in Mexico that everything is like the narco and the violence and the disappearance, but there's like other kind of stories that you have to
like this
talk about. Yes, I mean there are like so many stories. And Mexico is like such a big country, and it really makes it interesting. So it's important not just to focus on violence or the narco, you know, or the disappearance, or women being killed, which is true, but there's other kinds of stories. So I think that we, like the documentarian, should like talk about these subjects as well.
Yeah, show the plurality of voices. So I think you briefly talked about this in class too, but what are some problems then with showing like different voices and different people, like especially people who are known for their political projects or for being leaders of certain communities, that then when they get represented on film, they have issues with that?
Yeah, well, there's always a problem with ethics, of course. You know, I didn't have a problem with that, which I'm really happy. I finished the film and I showed it to her, and she was really happy. But I was kind of scared. Because if she wanted like to change like something, I would have to change it. I didn't have any choice. But there's other things, especially with the students, that they have like a lot of problems with that, because I mean they represent like somebody, and I mean it's their point of view about this person, and then of course the person doesn't like it, so there's like a big struggle. So, and I don't think there's like a rule. You have to see like every case in a special way and see what you can do, because you have the right to show other people about other people's lives, you know.
Yeah.
So it's very tricky.
Yeah,
that's to say.
So that's great. I mean, you had clearly very intimate access to both Eufrosina and her community, because I was really struck by that one scene where I'm guessing it's someone's living room, and they're talking, and there's a lot of women around, and she's specifically talking to the one guy and asking him about whether he hits his wife and whether he drinks.
And everybody's laughing. Which is
it's like the nervous laughter of like, well, everyone knows that he does, but no one really does anything. How did you manage that? How was that?
Well, because I went there like many times, you know, and I make like people get used to that. So, of course, this happened after like a lot of time of going there, and people get used to you. But you have to do that work. It's very important.
Yeah. Build the trust.
Yeah, people. And that they get used to you, and they're not looking to the camera, and you're just like normal to them. Yeah. There's some point that actually they get bored of you. So.
Because you're there all the time.
Yeah, I think that's important.
That's fair. How about the other side of access? Because you have that brief interview with the mayor, Eloy.
That was like very hard to get.
Yeah. How did you eventually get him to
I think
talk?
we were like very lucky. I mean, I wanted to do that like since the beginning, and of course he didn't want to. But there was going to be this voting in the end, and he thought that we were there because of that. So he let me interview him because of that. He was saying, well, this is the first time that we're not going to vote. It's because of me and all that.
Right.
So I just asked him about her. But I didn't know. I didn't tell him that I was doing a documentary about her.
Right.
But I thought he knew because he knows everything.
Yeah.
But I think he was like very proud about it. So
Yeah.
in the end, it was just like one of the last things I did. But I always thought that he was never going to say yes.
Yeah. No, it's a good get, and especially his very honest perspective on how he does not think highly of her and all of that. I heard that one of the best advice for interviewing people is to get them to talk about their opponents. So that
or about themselves.
Oh yeah. Well, if they're very
like
self-involved,
you know,
yeah, that's probably true.
Like to preach and say, well, but they say that maybe she has like something to do with this voting. So of course he didn't like that. So he started saying
You had to bring it back to him.
Yes.
Right.
But it was maybe like the hardest part to, well, I mean, not the hardest part, but it was hard to get that interview.
Right. How about like just physical access? Because there's those amazing shots of like wide shots of the whole mountains and the roads, which are very stunning, but they also sort of speak to how hard it is to get to these communities. So how did you get all of that?
We have to hire an airplane, and that flew from Mexico City to Oaxaca, and then we did these aerial shots.
Oh wow!
Yes, it was actually. I didn't want to do that because I thought, no, that's like too expensive. But the producers of the films could say, you must do that. I said, okay, well, I mean, if you're going to pay for that.
Yeah.
But they were like very insisting on that. Right. So that I have to tell it was because of them more than me.
I think they're great. I'm assuming this was post the grant, once you had more money and you could just hire a plane.
With the film school that gave all the money, well, and most of the money they thought it was like a production value that I think it is.
No, that's true.
That's why they're the producers and I'm the director, because like sometimes you're just like too stuck in your story. You say, no, that doesn't have to do with my story. Yeah. And it's funny because I'm doing a film now, and the producer is saying again, you need some aerial shots. I say, no, I don't need that because I want to focus on the emotion of the characters.
Right.
But with that background, I say, well, maybe he's right. Maybe I need to do some aerial shots as well.
Well, I guess it depends on the project.
It's a big fight, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, and to your credit, I think throughout, I don't know what other people would think, but throughout I could not tell what was shot before, when it was just you and two other people, versus when you had all those people and extra money and all of that. So I think that was, that's to you.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I did, like I saw with small camera, but the I think that the color correction is like really, really great. So you cannot tell very much because like most of the beginning of the town and everything, I did with a small camera, and then everything became more beautiful.
That's great. Okay, so I guess now I want to talk a little bit about the narrative, or at least the structure of the narrative, and mostly because, well, I guess my first question is, when did you decide to stop, that this would be when you stopped the story? Mostly because of Frosina's story, it gets better, it gets way better afterwards. But yeah, what was the point where you decided this is it? This is the story I want to say?
Well, when I started, that I didn't know what was going to happen, of course, because that's why I say, why do I want to make fiction? Because reality is always much greater, as you can see. You know, I could never imagine that was going to happen. But when I started, I said, well, I'm going to film until there's going to have this voting on the community and to see if women can vote or not, because that's what she was fighting for. So, okay, that's the map. And then when she started like getting involved into politics, I realized that if I kept like filming her when she was there, it's going to be like another story. So I have to finish there. And I like very much that she's doubting, that she realized that she got into a really bad place. Yeah. and I like that ending. So I think that's the way, because it's not, I mean, for me, it's not like a totally like positive thing. It's not nice because she lost all her freedom, you know. Now she's into politics, she's kind of eaten by the system. So that's my point of view of the story, in a way. So I think it was very important to end it that way, not like a big party, but to say, well, you know, it's not like such a nice story. And that was like very important to me. That's why I decided to end it there. Yeah. But it's hard to decide that.
No.
Always.
Yeah, and it seems like you ended it because it was this issue in particular, and that was the end of that issue. But obviously, in her last interview, she just mentions that all the other issues that are going to keep coming up for her as she becomes a politician.
It's just I think it's just before she's going to jump into that. So just before this moment. And then, of course, she jumps in. And that's another story to make another documentary, maybe. That's where the documentary should end, I think.
Frosina's story too, the sequel. So could you speak a little bit about like where her story has gone now, and also why? Because you mentioned you don't think it's necessarily a positive development, and
no, well, I think she's been doing like a good work. I mean, she's part of a right-wing party now, which is not very nice, of course. But the left-wing one is not very nice either. So you know, I don't know. I mean, at this point. But now she was more like a local congresswoman. Now she's a national one, and she keeps like having power and power. They say now that she could be like the governor of the state someday. She's growing, and but she had like a very hard time. Of course, she's in a right-wing party, and she's an indigenous woman. Of course, they attack her like very much. She suffered a lot, but she keeps surviving and fighting back. So, I mean, the struggle goes. But of course, she's part of the party. She's very much into, like a political woman. Of course, she lost, like, the touch with the community a lot. But she's trying to do things. You know, it's really hard to get into politics, as she says. But what I think is most important, I think that she was very naive. In the end, you can see that she doesn't realize where she's getting to. So I think that's a little bit of the drama for me, that she's getting into like something that she doesn't have a clue, and it's a very serious thing.
I think there's like 2 or 3 points. So first, when she talks about, well, I'm glad I didn't become the mayor because I'm doing so much better work. So it's at the beginning, and you say, oh, this is great. She did her organization. And then when she starts getting into the political party, and she's ambivalent about it, and now she's like full on in the party. And well, she does have that moment when she says, well, some say this is the far right party, but what's the difference between far right and far left, given these issues? But there's a clear difference. This is the far right party. It's
she didn't have. I mean, in that moment, I realized she didn't have like the slightest idea, and that like scared me a lot. So I have to sit here and say, okay, there is a difference.
Yeah.
But I mean, she was going to be like a congresswoman already. She was like 2 weeks from that, and she kept thinking about it. Oh my God, this is going to be a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, she's still there. She's still kicking.
Yeah.
So.
I think what I like about her, and it's something that's not very common, she's very honest and she say things, which is, of course, for a politician, is not very, and she say that she's scared and she doesn't know what to do, or she doing like things right or not. She was like very honest. Of course, that's something maybe for, I mean, when you are there, I think it's like very dangerous, but I admire her, for that, for being like so open and to doubt. I mean, politicians they don't say they have these issues. So
they're so sure of themselves. Yeah. So it's interesting in the, for those of you who have a program, in the translation of the title, so in Spanish it's La Revolución de los Alcatraces, which Alcatraces, I Googled this because I didn't know. It's
a flower.
Yeah, it's calla lily. And so it's the flower, and it's the flower because she was associated with this flower?
Yeah. Everybody asks me that because they don't understand why
the flowers.
Yeah, and at some point of the cut there was this explanation because she says that kind of flower is like the symbolism of the women of Oaxaca, because they're like very wild and they're like everywhere and they're very beautiful, but they just give it for granted. So for her it was some kind of a symbol for that. But I didn't like that she explained it in that way, so I just left the name.
Just left it
without any explanation.
So people can always have that question.
Yeah, well, they know it's like the symbol of Oaxaca.
Right.
But when I was going to translate it, I didn't like how it sounds in English, so that's why I changed the name.
Oh, so you did the change?
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to ask about that because it's something that could seem very small, but like the general scheme of theme, what was interesting is like in Spanish it sounds like it's a revolution of many, right? It's all the flowers, all the women of Oaxaca. And then in English it becomes Ofrecinas Revolution.
Yeah, it just sounds like better because the other translation was really hard to get and didn't sound very good.
Yeah, the revolution of the calla lilies.
Yeah, it's not very good.
Doesn't sound powerful. It just sounds like a special.
So I had to change it, and of course, like a lot of people ask me, but why do you? Well, I just did it.
Yeah. But I mean, on some level, I think it speaks to the balance that you're trying to strike between saying that she is doing this for the whole community and for all the women, but it's also very specific for her story, and also the reason why she's managed to make so many things is because of her own personality,
of
right?
Course. Yeah. Some kind of a revolution, a small one, but
yeah. So it's both. It's for everyone, but also there's not that many people that could have been taking her position and doing this for it, right?
I mean, she's pretty unique, and I think one of the most important things is that, like, for a person that was born in a very poor community with parents that they don't know like how to write or read, and then she becomes what she is. I mean, it's pretty big.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen every day in Mexico at all. So even if I say, well, like the power got her and is very bad, but still, it's like a big jump for somebody like that. You know.
It's true. I was reading up on what happened in her story afterwards, and she was a congresswoman in her state, right? And then now she becomes
in her state, but in a national way now, because they...
now she's in the main, so in the federal Congress.
Yes.
She's a congresswoman. And she's the director of the Committee for Indigenous Affairs. Exactly. So she just has all the titles. And so where are we now, 2016? No, 2 years ago, the UN had a sort of like a summit on Indigenous Affairs. Yes. And so the story goes, she had proposed a law speaking to usos y costumbres, so the idea that they couldn't infringe on whatever the community's ideas were. So if they couldn't allow women to vote, they wouldn't. So she proposed a law where she didn't want to remove usos y costumbres. She wanted to keep that sort of tradition of respecting indigenous communities' rights, but at the same time, these could not be respected if they infringed upon women's rights. So that was one of the main laws that she proposed in Congress, and that was stagnant for like 2 years. Precisely what you were talking about earlier, that the party did not respect her, and most of the people just like pushed her aside.
Or fear her more than not respect her.
Yeah, maybe yeah.
Fear her more than
knew she was way more powerful than they gave her presence. So.
Yeah, but then she went with the president and with other deputies, and she kept like insisting that law was approved, and of course nobody listened to her. But when she went to this forum, she sat near the president, and she said openly that he was going to support that law. So he didn't have any other choice to support it. Yeah. She's pretty tough to that. And of course you have to say yes, so they have to accept it.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of like being at the right moment and non-capitalized. Yeah, I mean, on some of it, she's a great political mind without even wanting to.
Yeah, I think she was born like that. She was born with that, like with a political gene or something, because she knows like how to talk to people in exact way to convince her, even if it's like her mother or a politician. She just knows like how to get to people. That's really impressive, and I think she was always like that.
And also because the mayor, when he mentions, she made a big deal of it because the media is really interested in women's issues nationally and internationally, and he made it seem like, oh, that's a problem, but it's actually such a great strategy. I mean, knowing how to do the work of translation and speaking to broader issues, right? Because so she's part of the, like we said, the right-wing party, but the reason why she was invited into that party is because Margarita Zavala, who was then the first lady, right? At the time, she was that was her, one of her campaigns, I guess, right? It was promoting women's rights generally. So she found a way to connect on that level.
Yeah, I think that because they asked me why this party wanted to support these women, I said, yeah, because they need that. I mean, I think that the left-wing party, they don't need like an indigenous woman because they need like other kind of people to earn votes, but they needed her.
Yeah.
And she knows it. I said, yeah, I mean, she told me, I know they're using me, but I'm using them as well. So, so she had it very clear. So I don't care. I mean, they can put. I mean, they can take pictures with me, like like the genius woman. But I'm gonna get all the things that I want for the community. So yeah, she's pretty bright.
Yeah. And I think, you emphasized a little bit, for her and in general, the importance of education and sort of moving these things forward, right? Like there's a story about her always wanted to go to school, but then she has that scene with the little boy who's very adorable, and he keeps saying the letters, and she's very proud of him, the letters. And then the one where they're trying to make the deal with the dad that dad won't drink if the girl keeps studying and gets good grades, so then she won't marry someone who drinks all the time and beats her up. So I think.
Yeah, and I have to say that after that, like 2 months later, like the father beat her up, like the kid, like really bad, and put all her teeth down. So, and that kind of stories, they happen all the time.
Yeah.
It's just something that had to do. Not because they're bad or something, it's just because there's a lot of poverty, there's no education, there's a lot of alcohol. So there's some serious issues too.
Yeah, I think that they also had that great interview with, I think it was a woman from the town as well, right after the mayor, who's complaining about Eufrosina from the perspective of, she's making us seem really bad, and she's saying that
there were a lot of people that they didn't want to be, because they're portraying in a bad way. So so there's a lot of things that you have. It's a very complicated issue. Actually, like the uses and constant things, it's very complicated as well, because they want to put it away, because they think that everybody should be like the same. So they say, there are like some things that they don't work, like this kind of gender thing, but it's a very important law at the same time, because it let people do whatever they want with their customs. So it's very complicated to make like general statements. You always have to see like the small letters in the.
Exactly. Because like you said, for the most part, those communities are completely disenfranchised. So at least having some sort of legal recourse on how to keep their certain traditions alive is good. But then you have the other kind of issues of oppression. So it's complicated. It's what it is. Maybe we can get more questions from people in the audience.
I'm just curious, do you know, has there been any kind of political fallout for her from this video? There just seem to be a lot of truthful moments from her that are opposition parties grabbing onto that and kind of using that as propaganda in any way that you know of?
I don't know.
Against, you meant where she's kind of progressing politically, has any of opposition parties kind of used any clips or any parts from this film in a way to hurt her politically as well?
Not really, no.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't heard any. I think that, in Mexico there's like so many terrible things going on that everybody forgets about this because there's always like a bigger issue, much more important. So things keep happening. So not really, no. And I hope not, of course, but.
One thing I wanted to ask is a lot of the aerial shots and the complicated nature of the landscape and the isolation of this area really came through too in the way these people spoke Spanish, right? And in the ways in which they articulated just sentences in Spanish, and you see the different languages that are spoken when the camera is there or when it isn't, or when sort of they're trying to ignore the fact that the camera is there and just do their thing. So what was it like to go into the indigenous community to make a film that you might want to reach a national audience, and that means shooting in Spanish, right? And did you want to ask them to speak Spanish to you, and were there moments in which that was not possible or it was denied?
Actually, it was very weird because, like, sometimes they speak in Spanish and sometimes they speak in Zapotec. That's it. And I think that what happened is that she was choosing a little bit, like, well, now let's speak in Spanish because maybe she knew it's going to work. But I never asked them to do that. It was something on her. She put like the language, because I have like a lot of scenes that, they're all in Zapotec. And maybe they didn't work for the film, but some did. So it was kind of a mix. It was like very natural. So I just let her do what she was, what she knew that it was like the best. But like when they're arguing with this guy, I don't know why they were speaking Spanish, because I never told them to do that. I think she decided it was like a good scene, so she started speaking in Spanish, and of course everybody speaks Spanish and Zapotec all the time, and they're mixing it together, so it's hard to know where they're going to speak in Spanish and where they're going to speak in Zapotec. But of course, it's funny because that Zapotec, they only speak it in that community. If you go to another community, it's Zapotec, but it's different. So for making all the translation, because I have like a lot of material, I had to take her sister to Mexico City and sit with the editor, and yeah, it was really hard, and translate everything and put the subtitles, because there was another Zapotec there. I said, no, but this is not Zapotec. Yeah, it is. Well, it's not my Zapotec, so it's different. so I cannot translate her. So I realized it's going to be hard to translate everything, but in the end, we managed to do it.
You mentioned this a little bit when you were talking about, her being part of the PAN, which is the right-wing party, but I have heard, that there's this big backlash in terms of other women's groups questioning her participation in this. So does she respond to them in the same way? Not just to political groups, but just sort of in general, the way, women who are critiquing what the PAN is doing, who are seeing that the PAN is sort of taking on the gender agenda just to take it on. But she clearly is staking out her claim that it doesn't matter which party it is, which I totally understand, because at the end of the day, as she says, they are still responsible for the things that happen in those communities. So, but do you know what that backlash perhaps have been?
Well, I think that she realized in the very first place that there were like a lot of people that were going to be like against her. Including women, and especially women from like from other communities, they were like, they don't like her because they say that she got into politics and she got like to the bad side. But I think she have like very clear that she, like the only way she's gonna be able to do all these like changes for her, I mean, in her point of view, is to get into politics. So she, of course, she keeps like getting attacked, but she have this like very clear. And actually, I was being attacked as well for the many groups saying that you are making this propaganda about her, saying, no, I'm just making a portrait of this woman trying to, but yeah, they were, no, because you need to get into community work and not into politics. That's not the way of doing things. So it's, I mean, it became like very polemic as well. No, I say, and now what is she doing? I say, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not her, I mean, like a follower. I just did a film about this specific moment, you know. So it was hard to make people understand that. And of course, that happens a lot. Making film, they think you're like their biographer, or their follower. So you're kind of responsible of what she does, and say, well, no, I just did this film, but I mean, you can ask her, but not me. But it's hard, you know. Like when I was talking about the ethics, well, it's a little bit, I mean, like that. You have like a big responsibility because there's a lot of people that are watching, and of course they want to ask you things, even if it's not you who, I mean, you are like portraying. So, I mean, the thing, you never know what's going to happen with your film, you know. Like sometimes there's a big scandal, or sometimes nothing happened, or there's a group that is against it, that you never thought that was going to happen. But I think that she had it like very clear. Me, not so clear, of course. I doubt that, well, maybe I should be like more hard with her, but in the same time, I say, who am I to be hard with her because she got into politics and start like, I don't know, like criticizing her, like, look what she did. It's not the kind of things I want to do. I just want to present what happened, you know. But yeah, that's it.
One more question.
Hello, and thank you. Another follow-up question. I'm wondering if there's been any progress in the communities since this film was shot and since she got more political power. Like, do they have streetlights now? The bridge, was it ever built?
Now there's a great road, because, I mean, for this winding road that was like really scary. Now there's a very nice road to the communities, and there's much more support. Yeah, there's a big change, I think. Of course, they cannot do it in all the state because it's very big and in all the country. But I think that for the area that where she's from, that she can do something about. Actually, there was like a big change in many things. I mean, in roads, in education, as he said. Now there's a law that protect like women if they don't let her vote. You know, I think there are what she can do, because she have like a lot of things against her. In that part, I do think that she did things, like important things.
And her organization's still running, right? Even if she's not the head of it. So.
Yeah, and there's a lot of women involved there, which I think that's a big change. You know, the women, like nobody was working, and now there's like some people working with the mayor that are women. So I mean, she made some changes there that I think are maybe more important. That she's involved in politics. That small changes are important, I think.
Yeah. And they're self-sustaining, and that will last. Outlast her even.
Yeah, sure.
So that's good too. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.